Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. I have Chief Story from Las Cruces PD in New Mexico. He has 18 years experience in law enforcement. Really excited to have him as our guest today. So welcome, Chief Story. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Paige. Thank you for having me.
Of course, for anyone who doesn't know you, I would love to maybe give a little bit of background. You've been in this career 18 years, so you rose the ranks pretty quickly. What did those 18 years look like for you?
I did. I joined the Marine Corps right out of high school, did 6 years, and then got out and pretty much went straight into policing. I was fortunate. Obviously, I started in patrol about 3.5 years. I went to K-9. Our team or our department has an ancillary SWAT team, so I was able to get on the SWAT team very early and start working my way up on the SWAT team at the same time. But did K-9 for 3.5 years, promoted to sergeant, was a patrol sergeant, then did time as our gang unit sergeant, working on an FBI task force. Went to promoted to lieutenant, went to traffic, did time as a traffic lieutenant, then as our training director. And then along there, I made my way to the SWAT commander, along with some other stuff. I got involved in teaching early on, which is one of my passions is teaching. And so I became an instructor in multiple different things. And that's helped me probably more in my career than anything else. And then from training director, I was fortunate to promote to deputy chief of operations. I was only in that position for about 10 months when my chief told me that he was going to retire in like less than 60 days and that good luck. Or he told me he's rooting for me to take over. So it was not optimal. I would have preferred a few more years before I put in, but it was that basically I had the conundrum: either I work for someone from the outside that I didn't want to work for, or I put my name in the hat, and fortunately I was selected. So here I am about 2 years later as the chief.
That's awesome. I'm curious to know because I'm sure there are a lot of people who are listening who are maybe earlier in their career and they have aspirations of following a similar path and to, rise the ranks in leadership. What advice would you give to someone who is maybe younger in their career in the context of leadership and, progressing their career in the same way that you did so quickly?
So a couple things. One, I would become an instructor early on. That may look different in their department, but if they can teach anything, that will help them become a better supervisor, and it will help them with public speaking and other things that ultimately will hopefully land you at the top. There's a lot of interviews and assessment centers that are part of the promotional process in most departments, and teaching helps you with those types of things. I would also say try to do different things within the department. I was fortunate to have a lot of opportunity. Our department's a mid-sized department, about 220 officers. So we have a lot of different units, maybe not as many as the large departments, but more than some of the really small ones. So find something else to do. When you become well-rounded, it makes you a better police leader because you can understand the different aspects of police. So try to do different things. And if that's just patrol, then become a field training officer as soon as you can and invest in the next generation, which is going to make you a better leader in the end.
I love it. And do you think that that's why teaching was so important to you? Because you did feel like you were able to not only develop your skills, but develop the skills of the future generation?
I think so. It's very rewarding when you teach someone and then it pays off. Sometimes it's because it saves their life, literally, and a lot of times it's because it gets them out of a bad situation. It helps them make a good decision, even on a routine call.
Mhm.
There's a lot of self-gratification from doing that and helping others.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I do also love the advice of, having a variety of different perspectives within the organization so that you can become more well-rounded. But I also think it gives you like more empathy and understanding as to what people are going through in their, designated assignments. Because if you only have one perspective, you can't really relate to someone else's perspective on the job.
So I think you stumbled onto something that really is critical for us at every level. Perspective is what matters. So many of our problems in policing are because of a lack of perspective. Now, that could be that the officer doesn't have the perspective that the chief has. He can't see it from that big picture. Vice versa, a lot of times we lose perspective as we go through the ranks. So we forget what it's like to even take a simple call that's not as simple as we remember it to be. Same thing with the community and our elected officials. They don't have the perspective, but the more we can share and kind of bring them into it, it usually works to our benefit. If we can even just give them a glimpse of what we go through, the reality of it, it helps us. And same thing, as a chief, if I go out and take 2 or 3 calls, it reminds me pretty quickly that it's not as easy as I remember it to be. And so perspective is really important. My union president went to an executive leadership class through FBI LEADA, and he came back, and that was helpful for me because now he's looking at things through my eyes and not just as a union president. So it can benefit everybody to have perspective.
Yeah, I agree. And I wasn't actually intending on asking this question, but I think it's kind of in the same lane. And this was something that was brought up previously in another conversation I had about, how do you teach young officers to have perspective in things that they don't have experience doing? And this was in the context of like working with the community. So, how can they have empathy, and perspective maybe in, um, a DV situation or whatever, someone in the community is going through if you don't have that same lived experience.
I'm a big fan of contact theory and what I believe is the truth that when we spend more time with other groups and it's positive contact, it bridges the divide and we become closer. That doesn't work all the time, but so it's finding opportunities for them to spend time with groups that they don't normally spend time with, and it helps with perspective and understanding. It's not the things that some of us like to do. Personally, I'm an introvert. I don't like going to community events, but I recognize the value. And now as a chief, it's more of a responsibility of mine. But I get that some officers don't love doing it, but I still think it's really beneficial to find opportunities for them to get a glimpse into somebody else's life.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I wanted to maybe touch on a few things that we had talked about offline, within your organization. And I know that you guys went through some hard times organizationally and were put in a position to really have to take a look at wellness and what that looks like for you guys. I was hoping that maybe you would give a little bit of insight into some of the challenges that you guys have had.
Yeah, going back several years, I mean, we had a string of officer-involved shootings. All of them justified, but some of them problematic from the community perspective. That put a lot of strain on both the department and our relationship with the community. And so wellness, several chiefs ago has already started working on this program and that process. More recently, once I took over, we had a series of extremely unfortunate events. We lost our first officer in the line of duty. He was murdered in the line of duty on February 11th, 2024. We've been around for 96 years. That's the first officer we've lost. Shortly after that, one of the officers who responded to the line of duty death committed suicide. That was our first suicide as an agency. We've had two officers charged with either manslaughter or murder. One of those we believe was a completely justified shooting. It's a political case. The other one we charged ourselves, which is still very difficult as an agency. And there's other things. So you just had all these things kind of stacked on each other that happened in a relatively short amount of time that had never happened before in the history of our department.
So you, as a new chief, experienced these things really early on in this role.
Yes, within a couple of months. Yeah, the first thing happened.
Wow. And how do you recover from that? How do you rebuild? What were some of the things that you did organizationally to heal from those things?
We're definitely still in the healing process, but like I said, we had a wellness program already built.
Yeah.
Definitely wasn't perfect, but we had resources and we had relationships already built. And one thing that was important for me personally is that I came from this agency and I already had those relationships with people. The officer we lost, I was a training director for his academy. It was the last academy I was a training director for. That was helpful for me. It also made it harder in some ways, but we looked for gaps, and some of those gaps became really apparent after we lost our officer and after we lost our second officer to suicide. And so we just worked as fast as we could to fill those gaps and provide the resources that we had not in the past.
And are you willing to share maybe what some of those resources have been that have been helpful for you guys to fill in those gaps?
Yeah, and so let me just quickly. So before we had kind of a lot of things that other departments had. We had EAP, Employee Assistance Program. We have a police psychologist on contract that people can talk to or family can talk to. We had Cortico, the wellness app. We had a lot of different things. But the things we were missing to me were the most important. So we were not taking care of our families. We weren't acting like a family. We were just acting like an organization. So after Jonah was killed, it became apparent like we have to do better to take care of our families. The spouses were a mess, as you can imagine, because they're all thinking about, one, this could have been my spouse, and two, they're hurting just because we lost an officer. And so we developed a family support group out of this that I probably would have never thought to do had it not been for Officer Hernandez being killed. And that's been extremely successful. Now, some people choose to participate, some don't, but we have about 70 spouses out of 160 officers. Many of those officers aren't married. So it's a good participation rate. We do a lot more family events. When I started, we would do, Halloween parties for the kids, Christmas parties, and then it kind of went away early on. And we do a lot more of that stuff the last few years. To be fair, we started some of that before Officer Hernandez was killed, but we definitely doubled down afterwards.
Yeah, I love that you put a focus on the families. I think that sometimes they're forgotten about and there aren't the resources that they need. And a lot of times, from what I hear, is that they don't really know who to reach out to. And maybe they don't have someone who they're close with that is a spouse of someone in law enforcement. And so I love that you have a platform for them to get together and be able to connect and communicate and relate to each other so that they don't feel like they're alone too.
Yeah, and that's been the biggest benefit to it is that they have now a connection and they have park day with the kids and they just go and hang out with their kids, get to know each other. And it's a balance. Obviously, you don't want it to become a gossip group. That's the danger. And so my wife runs it along with the deputy chief's wives, and they're very cognizant of that to keep it productive so it doesn't become harmful. But that's what it's been. It's been a resource where when they're going through a struggle, they have somebody that they feel they can reach out to.
I think that's great. And but one question I have for you is, as a chief, like how do you put together a wellness program that isn't just like a check the box and is something that's actually benefiting people? What are some of the things that you look for, or how do you gauge success of the various things that you implement?
I think that's difficult because many of these things are qualitative and they're hard to measure. I think some of the things that you do that are check the box are things we should do, but we want to ensure that we're not just doing that.
Mhm.
So a couple things. What back starting in 2016, long before I was chief, we brought in a researcher, Dr. Padilla with Texas State University, and she started doing these comprehensive wellness surveys. And so we've been able to bring her back multiple times, including last year. So we have 2016, 2018, 2020. So that's been really good to try to gauge the success of our wellness program. So we
Yeah.
have some instrument that's vetted to try to look. The other thing is we hired our wellness coordinator because a lot of the things we were doing I felt were fragmented. We had a financial wellness program that we offered free to our employees. We have deliberate cold exposure. We have the counseling services, but we felt like we were just kind of shotgun throwing them all out there and nobody was really making sure they're all working together or even checking the effectiveness or the usage. And so we hired a retired psychologist that's his job is to promote wellness and he can be a resource as a psychologist, but really it's to make sure that all the resources are being used. If they're not, is there something we can do to make them more usable or should we get rid of them and try something else?
Yeah. I love that you have metrics that you're trying to go by of like, okay, like is this actually helping people? How can we gauge and measure that? And then, like you said, bringing everything kind of all together to make it more of a, I think I can say it on here. I think most people have heard this word now, but maybe it's still a stigmatized word of saying more of a holistic approach to wellness. But I make the joke all the time. We can just say tactically holistic or whatever, and it's okay. But I love that you were trying to say, hey, how can we make this more whole? And then how can we make sure that it's being utilized and it's actually benefiting people? Because that's the thing. It's like, what is the goal? The goal is that these things are actually helping your people, that they're not just collecting dust somewhere in a closet. So I love that you're at least focusing on, what can we do to make it more usable? If it's not working, what can we implement that is working?
Yeah, and the best metric, which is just an anecdote, but when I have people come to me and say, "Hey, thank you for bringing on that company as an option because they've changed my life," and
Yeah.
and each of those resources won't work for certain people. So this resource might work for 5 people, and this one works for 10 other people. But having enough of them, and this is my philosophy, having enough of these resources and different types of resources, hopefully, will help the most people when they need it.
Yeah, we call it the buffet.
Yes, exactly.
Do you think that there's still a stigma to wellness?
I do. Although I feel like it has changed drastically, even in my short 18-year career, where it's gotten better, there still is a stigma. So I look back, and that's perspective again, right? I look back at the beginning of my career, and it's way better than it was then, but it does still exist. And I think there's still a reluctance to seek out help when they need it. There's a reluctance to talk about it, and we still have work to do in that area.
Why do you think there's still a reluctance? Do you think it's fear? Do you think it's, things that were instilled maybe early in their career for people who have been around for a while? Like, why do you think, even though there's been great strides, that there's still a stigma?
I do think it's cultural,
Yeah.
but I think that stems from the fact that we're police officers, whether you're a man or a woman, it's a tough profession. We're seen as tough, and we don't want people to see us as weak. And then there's this connection with seeking help as being a sign of weakness. And so as long as that exists at all, there'll be a stigma. And it's what we're doing is trying to break that down so we change the culture. And it's seen as a strength to actually deal with your problems before it gets to the point where you get fired or arrested and you ruin your career or your family.
Yeah.
That's not the old school mentality is I'll just suck it up until everything falls apart.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that in one way or another, everyone can relate to being in a situation where maybe you didn't deal with something that you should have, and then it didn't end the best, and then you're kind of put in a position to then have to deal with it. And I certainly have had those times in my life where I shoved everything down and I had that mentality of like, I'm good, I'm really strong, like nothing can penetrate this, wall that I've put up. And I definitely had that mindset for a really long time. And it did take me experiencing like I don't want to say it was a rock bottom. I think it was more of a crossroad moment of like, I need to make a change or else. And I think I had to reach that crossroad for me to understand that going through instead of avoiding, going straight through and dealing with everything is the strength, because avoiding and escaping and numbing, that's the easy part. Like that's the stuff that feels good, going through the hard things that you don't want to go through, and revisiting the things that maybe you shoved really far down there for a reason. That's the hard part. And I think that the strength comes from being able to deal with those things instead of avoiding and doing the things that are maybe easier or feel better.
I agree. I think we all have those moments, different circumstances, but all have those moments. And it's getting people to recognize that sooner they intervene or we intervene, the better, because we prevent it from getting to that point in the first place.
Yeah. And I know when we talked a little bit offline, you had mentioned, making it known within your organization that if you do seek resources, it doesn't mean you're going to lose your job, that there's still a job here if you, need to go talk to someone or whatever that is. And do you think that that is really, a part of the solution, is just making it known and then also showing that if someone does, reach for resources, that there's still a job waiting for them?
I do. I think that's really important. That's what I'm talking about because there is a point where I can no longer protect their job if they let it get to a certain point. Anywhere before that, we can work together, even if that means going away for 60 days or 30 days for a rehab or some other program. And multiple people have been able to do that. And now years down the road from when they came back, they're great officers because they finally dealt with whatever it was. The good thing about once they see that admin actually did that and the person was okay, and then the person comes back, and in our case, our experience is they become advocates
Yeah.
for seeking help. And so now that encourages other people to do the same if they need to. And I think getting to that point where you have somebody who's been able to take that leap and take the risk, trust in their administration that they're going to be okay, come back and then become an advocate, then it gets easier after that.
Yeah, because you're showing proof of what you're saying and you're building that trust. Because I do think that people are all looking like, okay, what's going to happen? What's going to happen with that person? Like, is it actually safe to do these things? And sometimes it does take that one person to, like you said, take the risk and trust. And then the organization to prove to everyone else that what you're saying is true. And then it's that ripple effect to build more trust over time.
Yeah, cops are cynical. So they got to say they're not going to trust it. Just like with the anonymous, we have multiple different providers and companies that are anonymous. They can go and get counseling or EMDR, but it's hard to get people to trust that. It was difficult to get people to say, yeah, I believe that they're not going to report my name and my hours. But once you get past that, it does get easier. But cops are always going to be cynical to some degree.
Really?
They're
I
skeptical.
I didn't know
They're
that. I didn't know
skeptical.
that. I didn't know that cops are skeptical. No. I had a chief tell me and I thought that this was really, really cool. He said that what he does is he takes the bills for, whatever therapy session that he gets, and he like, I don't know if he scans it or if he just whatever and like sends it to everyone saying, hey, like I know it's being used, but you can see like I have no names. So it is confidential. Like I'm not being sent anything. It's just that like I know it's being used. And that was like the visual for everyone to be like, oh, like that is what these companies are sending. And I know that they're not actually putting my name and tracking me as a person. I thought that that was kind of cool. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, it's not a bad idea. I think there's still going to be people that look at that and don't trust it because that's whatever you have to do. I think that's one way of doing it to get over that hump where people trust it. Once people do it and then they tell other officers like, "Hey, it's good. I'm okay. I've been using this." With one of our main providers, we're at max hours every month that he bills us for. That we say this is the number of hours that we'll pay you for, and we stay very close to max, meaning people are using it.
Yeah,
So I feel like we are over that hump where people will reach out and use the resources if they need them.
good. I wanted to talk about this idea of PTG, post-traumatic growth. Can you give me your experience and your insights on PTG?
I think out of all the different ones, in my opinion, the most important is for officers to understand that post-traumatic growth exists and that there is a path that even all the bad things that happen could result in a better life down the road. And if they don't even acknowledge that that's an option, they'd get in this cycle of PTSD or post-traumatic stress injury. And so that if there was only one thing that I would do as a chief, it would be to promote post-traumatic growth. And there's a number of different ways and organizations that do that, but um, we've been harping on that for a while. And we're probably going to bring in Struggle Well, which is one of many programs from Boulder Crest Foundation. But I think it's a great program. Like I said, there's others out there, but there's a lot of growth or a lot of healing that happens when people recognize they confront their trauma and they recognize that they can grow from it and that it can make them a better person, a better officer, a better husband, a better wife, better father, better mother, and not just let it be something that sends them in that downward spiral. And it's a decision point. I'm going to let this bad thing make me better, or I'm going to let it destroy me. And no matter what it is, we have that decision every time. It's not easy, but we have it.
And I think too, like even the phrasing, because I think like you said, perspective is really and like perception is really powerful. And if we're always saying, okay, it's a disorder or it's an injury, and that's where it ends, then you always feel a little bit like broken because of the perception of that. But if you say, no, there's an opportunity for growth, and this could be something that allows you to take this really, really hard thing and help others, heal from it, learn from it, grow from it, thrive, and then be able to help others in spite of those things. I think even just saying that, it feels inspiring. Like it feels really good to say, no, I can grow from this.
I agree. And I think most people can look back on their life and say something bad happened and something good came from it. And that's really the concept is it's hard in the moment to have that perspective. But some people will say they'll look back at, they went to prison or something terrible happened to them, but they say, I would not be where I am in my life today if it wasn't for that bad thing. And I'm so grateful for that. And it's getting people to recognize that at the beginning when the trauma happens, that there's a path to be better, especially if they focus on that.
Yeah. And do you have any personal stories that you can share of a moment where you experienced that? And how do you, because you're right, like it's when you're in the thick of it, it's so hard to see a way out sometimes. And how do we instill that idea of PTG to someone who is in the thick of it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start as an agency. When we losing Officer Hernandez, it's only been a little over a year, and we can already look back and say a lot of good has come from it as a department. We've grown closer. These family groups have come about, and so that's like on a department level. That's one way of looking at it. I look back at my childhood. I was extremely poor. I had good parents. I had both my parents in my house, and they were good parents, but we were poor, and we were had times that were harder than others, and there's some struggles there. But I look back and I'm very thankful for going through that because it gave me perspective. It made me the person I am today. And I wouldn't have the personality and the perspective and the beliefs I have if I hadn't gone through that as a child. There are times where it was tough.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And I feel the same way. Like, I think the hardest things that I've gone through in my life, now I look back and I sit here and I say, like, I really don't think I would be in this wellness space. I don't think I'd be so passionate about it. I don't think that I'd have any sort of empathy towards what people are going through if I didn't experience that myself, in different ways. And I think this is a reminder to anyone who's listening, like, everyone has different stories and it might not be the exact same as yours, but everyone goes through something. And I think that if we can have a little bit more empathy towards each other of like what those things are, and then realizing that, just because it's not the same doesn't mean that it's not valid. And there is an opportunity for us to come together and support each other through the hard times too. Because I think sometimes those judgments and those stigmas come from that lack of empathy for what the other person is going through.
No, I agree. And nobody goes through this life unscathed. Some people get beat down more than others, but everybody has things that happen that are bad.
Yeah, 100%. And I know that we talked about, some of the things that you're doing organizationally. We didn't touch on everything, but I wanted to see like if there's anything that you definitely want to highlight that's been really successful for you guys, but then also like what's still missing, what's next, maybe what are some of the challenges that you guys are seeing, and how you're trying to navigate those things.
There's been several things that have been probably more successful than I thought they would be. Um, Access to EMDR has been one of them. I've had multiple people come to me and say it has changed my life. Another one is deliberate cold exposure. In 2023, I believe 22 or 23, we contracted with a local company that does deliberate cold exposure and heat exposure. So they have cold plunges, they have IR sauna, traditional sauna, along with other things. And we did a 3 month trial with them, and the usage was way above what I thought. And people were telling me, like, this is, again, changing my life. This has been so helpful. And there's obviously a lot of research behind deliberate cold exposure, both physical benefits as well as the mental benefits, resiliency. And so that we bought cold plunges for both of our stations, the 4 locker rooms, men's and women's. And the usage actually went down when we brought it in-house, which again was kind of counterintuitive, surprised me. And the feedback is, well, I'm doing this to try to unwind and separate from work. I don't want to do it at work. So we've done another contract with that company to see if the usage goes back up. But for the people who are using it, I mean, they're huge advocates and they definitely want it to continue. And I thought it would be a beneficial thing, but I didn't think it would have the impact that it actually had.
I I was kind of laughing because I'm like, do you think that 18 years ago, um, you would have thought that you guys would have all of these resources and cold plunges like at the station?
No, because I would have thought it was stupid, I'm sure. And and when I first looked into it and started researching it, that's what changed my mind. Even if we have a therapy dog program, when somebody brought it to me, I thought it was kind of stupid. I started looking into it in the research, and it's been a really good program. So, I try not to be skeptical, but I am a cop. So sometimes I have to have my mind changed. But I would have never thought we'd have any of those things when I started.
I think it's a really good point to touch on, and I'm curious to hear your perspectives on this. How do you think that you can encourage more of an open mind in leadership? Because it sounds to me like you were able to do that. You were able to say, I think this is stupid, but I'm going to research and I'm going to consider it. And then after having that open mind and educating yourself, then you saw the benefits. How can leaders, you know, have more of an open mind to consider more resources?
I think it's just in policing in general, it's this balance between being a paramilitary organization and chain of command and having openness all the way up to the top level. And so you have to make sure that people can be innovative. We're not going to grow, at least not at the pace we should, unless from the very bottom level, if they have an idea, they can bring it forward. They
Mm.
feel comfortable bringing it forward, whether it's wellness or any other topic. And sometimes we're not going to go with it. That the way we do that is really important because if we just shoot it down and make them feel stupid, they'll never bring an idea forward again. And eventually they're going to have a good one. And so even if it's not something we can go with, explaining the why is very important. And if you explain the why, or maybe you can tweak it and adopt part of it, um, that's important. And once you start doing that, I think again, it builds a culture where we're encouraging people to be innovative. And that's what I try to do here, not perfectly, but I want ideas. I can't come up with all of them, and nor should I. I need to have people bring stuff to me, and sometimes I go with it entirely. Sometimes I don't go with it, and I try to explain why. And a lot of times, it sparks something, and we end up adopting some version of what their initial idea was.
I love that you brought up why. Are you finding that especially the younger generation, that that's really important to them is understanding the why behind things? Because I've been hearing that a lot.
And I hear that too. And I think maybe in the past, even with my generation, like you were just more willing to do it without asking why. But I think people still wanted to know why. We just maybe didn't say it. I think human beings in general want to know why. And in most cases, it serves us well to actually explain why. A lot of decisions that we make as leaders that don't go over well is because we don't take the time, whether it's personally or through the chain, to give a good explanation. A lot of times, even when I make an unpopular decision, if I explain it at the end, they go, I still don't agree, but I at least appreciate where you're coming from. And I'll take that over just completely disgruntled. So explaining why I think is important. Maybe this generation wants it more than others, but I think it benefits us when we can. Obviously, in the moment, life or death, there's no time for why, but a lot of times there is.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of different ways that we can use this concept of why, like when the why is important, then like the how and the what become easier to understand. Or like in the context of um, wellness, why is it important for you to be well? Why is your wellness important to you? And that could be, the job, your family, your performance. And when that is important to you and the why is important to you, then the how and the what becomes easy. So I think there's a lot of different ways that we can kind of understand the importance of why. And so I'm interested to hear, what is your why?
You know, I love this job. I was a Marine before, so for whatever reason, all through high school, all I wanted to be was a Marine. And so service is kind of, I guess, my personality or in my nature. And I made the decision to be a police officer for the family because the Marine Corps, military is hard because of the deployments. I do care about this community. I care about the safety. I want to serve. And at this point, my why is for this department. I care about these officers. I don't know that I could do this job at another department. A lot of chiefs are chiefs at 4 or 5 different places, and I can't imagine doing that. I'm grateful that there's people that do, but that'd be very difficult for me. The people I work for and with, they they keep me going, and so they've become my why along with my community. And we have our critics for sure, but we also have a lot of support within this community.
I love it. Thank you. I have one final question for you, and it's kind of a two-part. Um, one, what words of advice would you give to someone in leadership in the context of wellness or building out a wellness program or a culture of wellness? And then two, what words of advice would you give to someone who's earlier in their career? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you along the way.
So for the first one, I would say that the most important thing is that you convince your people that you care about them. I think almost all chiefs do care about their people, but that doesn't matter if people don't believe it.
Mm.
And anything you do for a wellness program, if they don't believe you care about them, they're going to be cynical of it and they're probably not going to use it and they're going to be scared that it's going to be used against them. And so if you're going to build an effective program, people have to believe that you actually care about them and these things are to make them better. For a young officer, I mean, I think we talked about this offline, but I wish I would have read Dr. Gil Martin's book, Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement, earlier in my career because being a police officer is a very unique job, a unique profession. And there are physical consequences to being a police officer, especially out on patrol. And then that manifests with behaviors at home that you can't really explain your spouse or your loved ones don't understand, and it creates tension in your marriage, which then can lead to bad coping skills or behaviors, and then it's all falling apart. And so reading that book helps you understand what is going on physically. Not that it's an excuse, but it's normal. And then you can do things to mitigate those effects. I wish I would have done that earlier. Fortunately, I made it through with my marriage, and we got through the hardest times, which is definitely the beginning of my career was harder than even now. As hard as it is being chief, those first few years were tough because it changes you, and there's all those physical consequences that you're not used to. So read that book if you haven't. Read it with your spouse or loved one if you can get them to do it, because it will, I think, make your life better. It'll make your relationship better.
Thank you. I appreciate your time so much. Thank you for coming on and sharing your insights on leadership and wellness. I really do appreciate your time.
No, thank you, Paige. I appreciate you having me on.
Of course, I wanted maybe just leave it up to you if there's anything else we missed. Otherwise, that's all I have for you.
No, I would just say it's tougher. I think it's tougher to be a cop today than it's ever been. It is 18 years isn't a long time. Some cops are cops for 40 years. In 18 years, it has changed so much, and it is far harder today than it's ever been, which means we have to take care of ourselves more than ever. So do the things that are going to keep you well.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it.